It was actually fun. It was a lot of fun.
It's always fun doing scripts. It's never too hard.
No, especially the beginning when anything's possible before
Yes.
you stop out, before you run out of sort of, okay, well, you can't really change that because we're locked into this now. And Pete's got an amazing imagination, so you start visualizing the film and how you want it to be really early on, and so that starts to inform the tone, but it also starts to inform the characters, which I had enormous fun with these characters. It was great.
That was the most daunting part of the writing, I think, at the beginning, was the fact we had to write for 13 dwarves and a wizard and a hobbit. It's like a large ensemble cast. So it was important for us that we literally took each of the dwarf characters, we studied the book, and we started to design their characters based on what Tolkien, how he described them. But there was a lot of gaps that Tolkien left. There was a lot of the characters that really were not that well defined, and we wanted every dwarf to be different, every dwarf to have a singular personality. And so we literally, we created a dwarf biography for each of the characters of who they were and their relationships with each other and their personalities. And that was one of the very first things we had to do that before we could even begin to write the film. I read The Lord of the Rings first, and I never read The Hobbit. I read The Lord of the Rings when I was about 17. None of these books were really part of my early childhood. And then much later on in the 1990s, I talked to Fran Walsh about the idea of adapting The Lord of the Rings into a film. It was way back when we were first thinking of that idea, before we approached Miramax. And Fran said to me, well, we shouldn't start with The Lord of the Rings, we should start with The Hobbit. And I said, well, I've never read The Hobbit. So at that point, I got the book and I read it. So I was well into my 30s before I read The Hobbit. And it's a great. And so the irony is that Harvey Weinstein at Miramax, who we were working with, didn't want to make The Hobbit first because it was co-owned by MGM and the rights were too difficult. And so we ended up doing it this way around, which I actually think worked out quite well in the end.
I think that was fate, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fate.
Yeah, I think having told the Lord of the Rings story has helped us make a better Hobbit, because the characters, really important characters such as Gandalf, who you know from the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, you're much more invested in them than I think you would be.
Yeah.
And also he goes off. He leaves the doors on a number of occasions in the book, and we get to tell that part of the story now, I think, in a more in-depth way and in a more exciting way because of Lord of the Rings. So
It is like, I mean, we're not just adapting The Hobbit, we're adapting The Hobbit plus as extra material that was included in The Lord of the Rings, especially in Return of the King, as sort of extra material in the appendix of Return of the King. And because Tolkien was developing a lot of his storyline of things that were happening in Middle-earth at the time of The Hobbit. And a lot of it informs the characters within the Hobbit book itself, and so we're able to use a lot of that material. So this is like a sort of an expanded, it's like a Hobbit supersized Hobbit in a way.
Yeah.
Well, that was really, it was part of the joy of the experience. I mean, it was wonderful to bring, some of our actors like Kate and Hugo and Elijah back again. And that was fun, like working with old friends. But then it was also great because we didn't feel like we were repeating ourselves, because we had, the story of Bilbo Baggins, the story of Thorin Oakenshield. We had new characters who really are the heart and soul of this story, and that gave a freshness to us. It felt like we weren't just writing, Lord of the Rings Part 4, which this is definitely not. This is a story unto itself. It has a different tone. It has much more of a humorous, sort of whimsical tone than the Lord of the Rings does. Well, Martin brings an incredible balance between drama and comedy. He doesn't. I mean, it was very important with Bilbo that we didn't deliver a comic Bilbo, a character who's trying to be funny. We didn't want an actor who would be trying to be a comedian. But what we wanted was someone to basically play Bilbo reasonably straight, but there's so much comedy in the situations that Bilbo finds himself in. I mean, this very conservative, fussy hobbit who suddenly finds himself dragged off onto this adventure into a world of danger, and he's so safety conscious. He doesn't want. It's the last thing in the world that he wants, and he's got to deal with dwarves who just are this like a rowdy, a sort of a rugby team type of group, and so the comedy which Martin absolutely got, and he was able to just play it, in my opinion, to perfection, is the comedy of the fish out of water of this fussy character having to deal with the dangers and the outrageous events that happen in the story. And Richard,
yes.
Well, Richard has a wonderful nobility. I mean, Thorin, above all, just has to have he has to be a complex character, but at his heart, he wants to do the right thing. But almost like his sense of the burden on him to lead these dwarves back and reclaim their homeland is ultimately, something he's not comfortable with sort of shouldering.
Yeah, we cast Richard. He was the youngest actor who actually auditioned for that role, and we had been looking maybe about 10 years older, and which is still young if you take it in terms of the book. But one of the things that I remember you saying to me was, you want to invest in him achieving his goal, which is to be a king, a good king to his people, and reclaim this homeland for them. And to do that, you want that slightly more youthful sort of energy and that sense of a life that has a possibility before it. And he certainly brought that to it, I thought. I felt so. And, he's pretty gorgeous. So that
I'm sure that was the main thing, Philippa. That chapter in The Hobbit, The Riddles in the Dark, it's called, is one of the most iconic moments of that book, and it was an absolute delight to be able to dramatise that scene. It was the very first thing we shot. We shot the Riddles in the Dark sequence in the first week of shooting, the first day of the shoot, and I did something I'd never done before. The scene was about 12 pages long, which we very faithfully adapted the way it is in the book. Didn't make a huge number of changes because, it is so iconic. And I decided, rather than just shoot the scene in pieces with different camera angles, I'd shoot it as like a multi-camera sequence where the actors were able to play the entire scene without stopping from one end to the other. It's sort of it's about 9-10 minutes long, and it was almost staged like a stage play. And then we moved into different camera angles and covered it from different angles so I could cut things together. But it was, I also wanted to give Martin a chance to find Bilbo, because it was his very first shooting that he did, and Andy was there in full force as Gollum. I felt sorry for Martin because suddenly he was having to find his feet as Bilbo Baggins, and he had Andy Serkis coming at him with high octane energy as Gollum. So, but Martin held his own, I got to say, and in the process of that week that it took us to shoot that one scene, he found Bilbo. Bilbo came to life.
Andy was pretty funny. He was excited because he said he got to play Gollum 60 years younger and much sexier, because he's got more hair and more teeth.
Well, one more tooth maybe.
Maybe one more tooth. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I've been intrigued about high frame rates for a long time, because 24 frames a second is a speed that the industry has sort of locked into since 1927, and all the mechanical cameras and projectors that were ever built in the last 80, 90 years were just made to shoot at 24 frames a second. But with the advent of digital cameras and projectors, you don't have to do that anymore. And so I was thinking, well, why are we still shooting films at 24 frames? It does flicker, it does strobe, it does blur. And I did a part of the Universal theme park in California. We did a King Kong attraction for them about 4 or 5 years ago, and we did that at a high frame rate. the first time I'd been involved in it, and it was terrific. It's only 3 or 4 minutes long, but you were totally immersed in this world, 3D, high frame rate. And I thought, wow, imagine if we could shoot a feature film like this. Why can't we shoot a feature film? And that question was in my mind. And then when we started The Hobbit, I thought, you know what? Why don't we just shoot this at 48 frames a second and hope that in 2 years, from the day of shooting in 2 years when the first film is released, hope that enough cinemas in the world can project it. And, we've got 1,000 screens around the world that are going to be showing this at 48 frames a second. And I think it makes it very immersive.
You have that choice too, which I think
yeah,
is cool.
we also have the 24 frame version if people don't want to see the high frame rate. But I think it's where the responsibility is on us as filmmakers to use the technology to improve the cinema going experience. I mean, cinema has to be larger than life. It has to be that magical place that you go for that experience. And I think the magic is getting eroded with iPads and iPhones and home entertainment systems. There's so many choices now. And I think we have to up the bar. We have to raise the bar as filmmakers to attract audiences back in for that big screen experience. And I think things like high frame rates, 3D, incredible size screens, improved sound systems, we have to keep pushing it because we need to keep getting people back into the cinemas again. Well, what can you say? Some of it is an accident in the sense that, I'm a New Zealander, very happy to live here, don't really want to live anywhere else in the world, and so I'm just lucky to be able to make my films here. The Lord of the Rings was a book we wanted to adapt, and New Zealand just happened to be about the most perfect country on earth to find those locations in. So it's a sort of it was just various forces coming together, but it's a small country, but it's a country that's very proud of its achievements, whether they're sporting or artistic achievements, and I just feel blessed really to have the support of the country behind us every step of the way.
Yeah, no, I have to second that. What's been lovely is a lot of young crew and even some actors got their start on The Lord of the Rings, and then you see them 10 years on, and they've worked overseas, they've done a lot of things, and so it's something started with The Lord of the Rings that we're benefiting from, other filmmakers are benefiting from here. But I also think a particular thing about The Hobbit is that everyone knows someone who's worked on it in New Zealand. That's what I found, or is working on it, or so it is a little bit of a family affair. It's nice.